Another elegant way to bring in some text is to create a little staggered movement combined with a little color shifting is a very, very elegant way to make something land. In this particular case, I've used in warm color so that it comes in hot and then kind of sort of lands in a white, cool, sort of solid landing. So this is actually a fairly simple process, but it is a little time consuming. So I'm going to create a new composition and I'm going to call it color shift drop. Sure. 1920, 1080, 24, black background's totally fine. We're not going to need more than a few seconds. We'll leave it at 10. That's fine. I hit OK. All right, we're going to need a text layer. So I'm going to go Layer, New, Text, and I'm going to type. And I don't really like that font, so I'm going to pick something else. Let's go ahead and make it white to start. Okay, one thing I've discovered is you can't have your anchor point in the middle of the word. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that if we're going to start taking letters away, things can get really confusing really fast if I have this centered. So although I centered the object, what I can do is I can turn off the centering of text. So I'm going to go to the paragraph controls here and I'm going to say left justify this. And then I'm going to go to the positioning controls for this level and I'm going to go letter P and I'm going to move it over so that it is in pretty close to center position. All right, now I want this to animate down into this position. So let's go say a second in, because that's about how long I want it to take to land. And I say from a position standpoint, this is my ending place. This is where everything should be done, finished. So I mark a keyframe, so now that's set for me. And now I'm going to go to the beginning of the timeline. I'm going to manually set a new keyframe. And then I'm going to go to the Y, and I'm going to pull it up. So now when I play it, it drops down and lands there. Now that's a little harsh of a landing. So if we want to smooth it out, I'm going to right click on this keyframe. I'm going to go to good old keyframe assistant and I'm going to ease into this point. So now it should land a little smoother. Nice. All right, so now I need to actually duplicate this layer a couple of times so I can animate these letters one at a time landing. All right, so I now have this layer done. It's only going to be a reference layer, so let's go ahead and duplicate it. So I'm going to do Command D for one for each letter. We're not going to use the bottom layer where the whole word is there, so we don't count it. But the next layer is W, then E, then B, then S, then T, then E, then R. So I hit Command D every time, and I can actually go in and protect myself from making a mistake by clicking on it and saying, okay, this layer, I hit Return, and I say this is W, and then I go to the next layer, hit return, and this is E, and go return, B, next layer, return, S, next layer, return, T, next layer, return, E, and last layer, return, R. Now they're at least labeled, which is kind of nice. All right, so when I do this process, I like to sort of turn that bottom layer, which is purely for reference, change it to a different color so that I can't miss it when I'm actually trying to align everything. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. But if I go to this layer and I select all the text that is here, and then I go to the character area, I can change the color of this to something that stands out a little bit. And we're going to do kind of a red. All right. Now, the reason you can't see the change that I made is because all these layers are on top of it, and every one of these layers, even though I've named them letters, they aren't letters yet. They're the whole entire word. So I am going to go down here, and I'm going to turn that on so you can see it. Now, if I go to the W layer, and I go to the text tool, I can then swipe across and eliminate everything but the W. Now, the only way that worked is if this layer was selected and the eyeball was on. So the next layer is the E layer. So if I go in here and I look at it and I go, okay, everything's there. We need to lose some things. So I'm going to go make sure I'm on the text tool again, and I'm going to say let's lose everything after the E and maybe even the W before. And then I'm going to try to push the E into the position it was in originally. And I'm just going to sort of use the kerning controls, the option arrow left and right to sort of get it in the right place. So now the two letters fall together, which is great. And if I stagger them, they'll be even nicer looking. So let's go to the B layer. Let's turn it on, which is going to cover everything up, at least until I can get in here and I can say lose the STR and lose the W and the E. And then I'm going to space, 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 get it as close as I can, and then use the option arrows to like get it better aligned. All right, double check that that's falling correctly, and it is. So we're happy about that. We're going to move on to the S layers. I'm going to turn it on. Of course, the S layer is totally full. So we're going to go here, make sure I'm on the titling tool. I'm going to get rid of everything after the S. And I'm going to put spaces in again to get it close. That's pretty good. And then I'll option, it's pretty good. Go on to the T layer, turn it on. Title tool still selected. Get rid of everything up before the T, get rid of everything after the T. Make sure my cursor's on the front. Space bar it down and finesse it into place. And now I'm ready for the E layer. And I'm going to turn it on, get the title, make sure it's still selected, the title tool, which it is. Get rid of everything but the second E. Go back, space bar it, get it close as I can get. And then finesse. And then finally the R layer. Turn it on. Title tool still selected. Go get rid of everything except for the R. Put spaces in to put it back where it's supposed to be. And finesse it into place. Now that's pretty good. That's pretty good. If I turn off the red behind it, you can't even really see anything coming or going. All right, so now everything falls in at the same time, which is pretty cool. However, we want to actually ripple those, but I want to change the color first. I'm going to show you how to change the color first. I'm going to go to the first layer and I'm going to have the W change colors as it drops. So to do that, I'm going to open up the W. I'm going to go into the text controls, and you'll notice over here there's this little animate button. What does that mean? It means you can animate certain characteristics that are inherent in text. So if I hit animate, I say, what do I want to do? I want to animate the fill color. I want the RGB to change. So as soon as I do that, it says, oh, you're dinking around with the color. Let's give you a color you can't miss, and it's red. Okay, that works pretty well. The only thing is, what I want it to do is I want it to fall and transition by the time they hit, transition to white. So at this point in time, the fill color should be white. So we have no keyframes set yet under fill color. It just knew that if I said animate fill color that I would want these controls. So I'm going to say fill color, yes, let's mark our first keyframe here. All right. And I'll go back to the beginning and I'll mark a fill color here. And I actually like the red on the front, but I want it to end on white. So how do I get to white? Well, I can go into the selector for this keyframe, and I can go up to the white in the corner and hit OK. And what I get right now is red to white transition, which is cool. It's kind of smooth looking. But let's say we want to introduce yellow in the middle of this. So right smack in between the keyframes I already set, I'm going to set a new keyframe, and I'm going to tell it, this time I want you to, by this moment in time, I want you to be yellow. So if I hit OK, now it sets yellow, and it'll go from red to yellow to white, which is pretty nice. And then I'm going to want to do that to all of them. So could we have possibly done them to each letter individually? Probably, but I think in this case repetition is your friend, because you're going to want to be able to know how to do this. So I'm going to go to the letter E, and I'm going to make sure that we are starting in the red that it gave us as default. So I'm going to go to E, I'm going to uncollapse it, I'm going to go to text, I'm going to animate, fill color, RGB, and by default it goes to that red, which is pretty cool, and I'm going to set a keyframe there. Yes, let's start at red. Then I'm going to go by here, I want it to be white. So I'm going to mark another keyframe manually, and I'm going to open the controls, and I'm going to actually go to white. And then, if you remember, we had yellow at sort of the midpoint. So what I can do is go to that midpoint, set a new manual keyframe, And this time, instead of selecting it manually, I'm going to actually get the little eyedropper and say, yeah, that yellow. And I just, boom, set it to the right color. And it was that easy. So now I'm going to move up. I'm going to go back to the front of my timeline again because it's going to default to red, which is nice. And I'm going to go to the B layer and I'm going to open it. And I'm going to go to the text animate area and I'm going to fill color. I'm going to do RGB. It's going to go red, which is cool. Set the first keyframe. Go to the end of this, which is always happening at 1 second. I'm just sort of eyeballing it based on what we set already in other tracks. And I'm going to manually set a keyframe here, and I'm going to tell it white, which I can either eyedropper the white that's already here, which is perfectly fine, or I could have opened it and gone to the white in the corner here. Either one will work. And then I'm going to go to that little yellow mid-section, mid-keyframe, and I'm going to say, yep, let's create another keyframe here, and I'm going to sample the yellow. All right. Pretty cool. Everything's falling together. I'm going to go to the next layer and we're going to repeat again. Text, animate, fill color, RGB. Boom, it goes red. Let's mark red for that first keyframe. Let's go on to the end where it goes white. Manually set a keyframe. Eyedropper white. Go to the middle keyframe. Eyedropper yellow. Notice that as soon as I set another color, as long as I wasn't parked on the keyframe I was already on, it set a keyframe for me. So I've been saying, go set a manual keyframe over and over again because I want you to understand what's happening. Every time you make an adjustment, it's going to make a keyframe unless you're already parked on a keyframe. I think it's good to sort of manually start by setting them by hand, but you will eventually have fewer mouse clicks if you work this way. All right, I'm going to go to T, I'm going to open text, I'm going to go to animate. I'm actually not at the beginning, and if I want to save from having to sample the red, I want to park at the beginning because we used the default red. I did animate, fill color, here comes that default red for us. So in a sense, that first keyframe is already made, or at least set right. Now we have to actually make one by clicking on the stopwatch. Go to the end, mark a manual keyframe, which again, I don't really have to do. I could have just eyedroppered the white and it would have set one for me automatically. I'll prove it now by going to the yellow, eyedroppering and choosing yellow, and boom, it set a keyframe for me. So now everything goes red, yellow, white, which is good. And now 2 more to go. Most efficient way to do this would be to go text, animate. I am at the front of the key of the timeline, RGB, set a keyframe, first keyframe there, go to the white, eyedropper the white. It already made a keyframe. Go to this yellow and get the yellow set. And now we have them all. But the last one, so I'm going to do the same thing. Text, animate. Am I at the beginning? Yes. Animate, RGB. Manually set a first keyframe. Go to the end of it. Set a white keyframe. Go to the middle. Set a yellow keyframe. And now all of our letters fall together, which is nice. Obviously, it feels like we could have done that much easier, but if we had just done the one layer, we couldn't do this. What is this? Well, this is staggering. So if we actually kind of stagger all of these by a frame or two, your letters are going to fall in a ripple motion, which is really nice. All right, now my loop is set too small. So let's go here to the 2-second mark and mark an N and then spacebar, and we should see them. Look at that. Very nice. Now, if you want more of a ripple, then you make this distance greater, and it will ripple differently. If you want them all to fade on, it would be very easy to say, oh, I want to match opacity moves with the keyframes I am already doing. So what do I mean by that? So if I open this, and I can see the keyframes where we were before, this is my W layer, I could decide, oh, well, keyframe 1 is also going to be where the opacity is set to 0. So if I do T for opacity, and I manually say this keyframe, boom, is 0, I can then go to where it lands, and I can manually set another keyframe and turn it up. So if I wanted to, I could do all these letters and have them elegantly sort of fade up as they come in. I'm not going to do it just in the interest of time, but as you can see, you can make it as elegant as you want. Usually it's the hue animating itself that gives you the sort of illusion of it easing into your view. And that is how you can create a very elegant rippling effect that appears to be more work than it actually was.